I spent 27 years in a cell on Robben Island. 7 feet by 9 feet, a bucket for a toilet, limestone quarry 6 days a week, until the glare nearly blinded me. And when I walked out, on the 11th of February, 1990, I did not walk out with a fist raised for revenge. I walked out with a hand extended for reconciliation, not because I had forgiven what was done, but because I understood that the country could not survive what would come next if I had not.
And I spent my years in a different kind of prison. The prison of being black in America. No walls, no guards. Just a system designed so perfectly that the prisoners police themselves. When I walked out of that prison, I did not extend my hand. I extended a mirror. And I said, look at what they have done to you. Look at what you have been taught to accept. And stop accepting it.
Let me explain what reconciliation costs, because people who have never tried it imagine it is softness. When I sat across from the men who had imprisoned me, the men who had ordered the torture, the assassinations, the disappearances, I did not feel peace. I felt fury. Every part of me wanted justice in the way you define it. Punishment, accountability, retribution. But I had studied history, Algeria, Congo, Zimbabwe. I had watched liberation movements win the war and lose the country, win the revolution and inherit the rubble. I chose reconciliation not because it was right in the moral sense, but because it was the only strategy that left a country standing at the end.
And what kind of country did it leave standing, Nelson? 30 years after your rainbow nation, South Africa has the highest inequality on earth. The land is still in the hands of the same families. The mines, the banks, the farms, still owned by the people who stole them under apartheid. You gave them peace. They kept the wealth, and your people are still waiting.
That is a fair criticism, and it is one I carry.
It is not a criticism. It is a diagnosis. Reconciliation without redistribution is a handshake that leaves one hand empty.
Let me tell you what confrontation does that reconciliation cannot. It tells the truth. When I stood in Harlem and said that the white man is your enemy, I was not preaching hatred. I was describing a system that redlined your neighborhood, poisoned your schools, shot your children, and then asked you to march peacefully and sing hymns about brotherhood. Martin sang those hymns. He marched peacefully, and they shot him too. Confrontation strips the mask from power. Reconciliation lets power keep the mask. It just asks it to smile while wearing it.
And confrontation, what did it build? You were assassinated at 39, Malcolm, not by the system you opposed, by members of the movement you helped create. The Nation of Islam put 15 bullets in you because you evolved past their orthodoxy. Confrontation eats its own. It must, because once you define the world as the oppressor and the oppressed, anyone who moves toward the center becomes a traitor.
That is true, and I will not pretend otherwise. I was murdered by my own people for changing my mind. After Mecca, after I saw Muslims of every color praying together, I began to believe that the problem was not the white man. The problem was the system the white man built. But by the time I understood the difference, I had made too many enemies inside my own house.
Then we both paid a price. I paid with my people's economic freedom. You paid with your life.
But here is what you must ask, Nelson. Who did the system actually fear? When I spoke, the FBI followed me. The CIA monitored me. J. Edgar Hoover called me the most dangerous man in America. When Martin spoke, they bugged his hotel rooms, tried to drive him to suicide, and eventually killed him. The system feared us both, but it feared me differently. It feared Martin because he could inspire the masses. It feared me because I could inspire the masses to stop asking permission. And a population that stops asking permission, that is the one thing no system can survive.
And yet, the American system survived both of you. Apartheid did not survive me. You can argue that my compromise left too much intact. That is fair. But the system changed. Black South Africans vote. They hold office. They have constitutional rights that did not exist before. Imperfect, deeply, but structural. Your confrontation in America did not end the system. It forced the system to learn better camouflage.
Then perhaps neither of us won. Perhaps the argument is not which strategy works, but how long any strategy works before power adapts.
Now you are speaking like a man I could work with.
I usually am, once people stop quoting only the early speeches.
We are debating history. Let us debate the present.
The present is proving both of us right and both of us wrong at the same time.
Let me describe what I see. The year is 2026, and the question we spend our lives debating, forgiveness or confrontation, negotiation or resistance, is being answered in real time across the Middle East. Iran negotiated. It sat across the table. It agreed to disarm its enriched uranium under full international verification. And the night after it agreed, the United States and Israel bombed it. Hezbollah honored a ceasefire. Hours later, Israel launched its most devastating attack on Lebanon. 100 airstrikes in 10 minutes. 357 people killed in a single day. Lebanon called it Black Wednesday. Reconciliation was offered, and the hand that reached out was cut off.
And this is where I must be honest about the limits of my own philosophy. I built the Truth and Reconciliation Commission on a principle that if you offer the powerful a dignified exit, they will take it, and the nation can heal. But what happens when the powerful do not want an exit? What happens when the offer of peace is treated as weakness and the ceasefire itself becomes a weapon? On the 7th of April, a 2-week ceasefire was announced between the United States and Iran. Pakistan brokered it. The Pakistani Prime Minister said explicitly, "The ceasefire includes Lebanon." Iran said the ceasefire includes Lebanon. Within hours, Israel launched what it called Operation Eternal Darkness. The name alone tells you everything about the intent. And when the world protested, Israel's prime minister said Lebanon was never part of the agreement. The United States, the country that brokered the ceasefire, backed Israel's interpretation. The mediator said one thing, the partner said another, and the bombs fell anyway.
This is the pattern I spent my life identifying. The system does not say, "I will never negotiate." The system says, "I will negotiate," and then redefine the terms after you have disarmed. It is not the refusal of peace that destroys trust. It is the performance of peace while the killing continues. Today, 5 days later, the peace talks in Islamabad, 21 hours of negotiation, have collapsed. The American vice president says Iran chose not to accept their terms. Iran says the demands were excessive and unreasonable. And the American president has now declared a naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, effective immediately.
A blockade on the waterway that carries 20% of the world's oil. Iran's Revolutionary Guard says the strait is open for civilian vessels, but military ships will be dealt with severely. We are watching two powers play chicken in a shipping lane, and the global economy is the passenger.
So let me put the question plainly, Nelson. If you were Iran, if you had agreed to disarm and been bombed anyway, if you had honored a ceasefire and watched your ally be massacred hours later, If you had sat through 21 hours of negotiations only to have the other side walk away and declare a blockade, would you still extend the hand?
I do not know. I extended my hand to men who had imprisoned me for 27 years. But those men, de Klerk and his cabinet, they wanted a way out. They could see the mathematics. White South Africa was 4 million people governing 40 million. The economics were unsustainable. The world was turning against them. They took my hand because the alternative was worse for them. What I see now is a situation where one side believes the alternative is never worse for them, where military supremacy makes compromise feel optional. And when the powerful believe they never need to compromise, my method fails.
And mine leads to a cycle of destruction that feeds itself forever. I know this. I saw it in my own movement. Anger without structure becomes chaos. Resistance without a political program becomes theater. But I will say this. When a people have tried every peaceful avenue and been punished for each one, you cannot ask them to keep extending the hand. At some point, the hand becomes a fist, not from ideology, but from mathematics.
3,400 people killed in Iran, over 1,600 of them civilians. 2,000 dead in Lebanon, 23 in Israel, 13 American soldiers. Universities bombed, heritage sites destroyed, a 100-year-old vaccine institute reduced to rubble, schools targeted, children among the dead. What do we owe them? Not just memory, not just mourning. We owe them an honest answer to the question, did anything we believed actually work?
My answer is this. Forgiveness works when both sides have something to lose. Confrontation works when the cost of inaction is higher than the cost of resistance. And neither works. Neither. When one side has decided that the other does not deserve to exist as an equal.
Then the answer is not in choosing between our two strategies. The answer is in forcing a condition where reconciliation becomes possible, where the powerful cannot simply refuse the table. That is what the world failed to do here, not mediating between equals, but failing to create the conditions where negotiation is anything other than a photo opportunity for the powerful.
And until those conditions exist, my people will resist, not because resistance is righteous, not because violence is justice, but because silence, in the face of what is happening right now, is complicity.
Before we close, I want to speak to what happened in the last 5 days. A ceasefire was announced, Hezbollah stopped firing, and Israel launched its deadliest attack on Lebanon since this war began. 357 dead. Entire neighborhoods destroyed without warning during rush hour. Israel's prime minister said he had created 3 buffer zones in Lebanon, Gaza, and Syria. And he called this a paradigm shift. We initiate, we attack, we are deep within their territory. That is not defense. That is annexation dressed in the language of security.
And today, talks have collapsed. A blockade has been declared. Iran's internet has been shut down for over 1,000 hours. Political prisoners are being hanged. Irish citizens are protesting fuel prices in the streets. And the people who started this war, the ones who struck first the night after a disarmament deal, are asking why Iran will not come back to the table. You ask me, forgiveness or confrontation? I ask you, what do you call it when you offer forgiveness, and they bomb you for it?
I spent my life believing that no situation is beyond reconciliation. Still believe that. But I will say this, and it may be the hardest thing I have ever said. Reconciliation requires 2 sides willing to lose something. When one side believes it can take everything and pay nothing. The hand I extended on Robben Island means nothing. And that is a failure not of my philosophy, but of the world that refuses to enforce it. 2 men, 2 answers, and a world testing both of them to destruction.
Perhaps the real question was never forgiveness or confrontation. Perhaps it was always, who gets to choose?